All right, let's dive right into this explainer. When we think about blood, we usually just picture those red and white blood cells rushing around like tiny vehicles on a microscopic highway. But today, we're going to look at the highway itself. We're focusing on the true, unsung heroes of your veins, plasma proteins. And hey, these aren't just dry, boring biology terms to memorize. They're actually the invisible, microscopic managers working tirelessly in the background, literally keeping us alive every single second of the day. So picture this. If you were to spin a vial of blood down in a centrifuge, what's actually sitting in there? Well, I want you to look completely beyond those obvious red and white blood cells clumped at the bottom. Instead, look up. Direct your attention to that top layer. It's this clear, kind of straw-colored fluid. And that fluid? That is what's holding the real hidden machinery of your entire body.
Now, before we get too deep, it's absolutely crucial we establish exactly what fluid we're analyzing here. You've probably heard the terms plasma and serum thrown around, sometimes even interchangeably, but listen, they are absolutely not the same thing. Plasma is the complete fluid portion of your blood. It includes all of your clotting factors, the whole shebang. But if you take that plasma and remove those clotting factors, boom, that leaves you with serum. Understanding that fundamental distinction right out of the gate is key to everything we're going to cover today. When they actually break down the plasma itself, the composition is pretty striking. It is overwhelmingly just water, about 92%. That leaves a tiny, almost seemingly insignificant 8% slice of the pie for our plasma proteins. But do not let that small number fool you. No way. That 8% fraction is responsible for an absolutely staggering amount of biological heavy lifting, doing everything from defending you against infections to maintaining your very blood volume. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by needing the proteins, then look closely at albumin, followed by globulins and fibrinogen. After that, we'll see how they react to body stress, and finally, how doctors use them to decode disease. Let's get into it. Section 1. Meet the proteins, the big three. Almost all of these microscopic managers share a common birthplace, specialized tissues right there in your liver. And what's really incredible is just how diverse they are in both their size and their concentration. Just look at albumin. You need a normal value of 3.5 to 5 grams per deciliter with a molecular weight of 66,000 daltons, which, by the way, is just how we measure atomic mass. Then you have globulins, which are heavier, ranging way up to 156,000 daltons. And fibrinogen, it's a massive 340,000 daltons, yet it's only present in these tiny, tiny amounts, like 200 to 400 milligrams. Maintaining these exact, highly specific values is what establishes your body's baseline harmony. Moving on to Section 2, albumin, the heavyweight champion. When I say heavyweight champion, I mean albumin absolutely dominates your bloodstream. This single protein, which is made up of a very specific chain of 585 amino acids, is the ultimate multitasker. It performs 4 massive roles. First off, it acts like a giant sponge for osmotic pressure. Second, it's an incredible pH balancer, using these specific histidine amino acids to just juggle protons. Third, it acts kind of like a biological Uber, transporting free fatty acids, calcium, and even common drugs like aspirin around your body. And fourth, it actually provides nutrition. Because it carries all the essential amino acids, your tissue cells can literally drink it up for food through a cool process called pinocytosis. Actually, let's look a bit closer at that first function, because it is absolutely crucial. Oncotic pressure is the specific osmotic pressure exerted by these proteins. Because proteins like albumin are just too big to escape your blood vessel walls, they create this vital push and pull mechanic. They draw and keep water safely trapped inside the capillaries. In fact, albumin alone contributes to a whopping 80% of this pressure. If your albumin levels ever drop below 2 grams per deciliter, it loses that pulling power. Fluid just leaks right out of your blood vessels into your tissues, causing a really dangerous swelling known as edema. All right, Section 3, globulins, the versatile defenders. So, while albumin is your trusty maintenance manager, globulins are your versatile defenders, and they fall into 3 main categories. Alpha and beta globulins are mostly synthesized in the liver, and they act as vital transport proteins in lipoproteins. But gamma globulins, they are incredibly unique. Your liver actually doesn't make these ones. They're essentially antibodies synthesized by specialized white blood cells called B lymphocytes. Think of them as your immune system's special forces, just constantly circulating in the plasma to hunt down threats. Next up, Section 4, fibrinogen, the clotting crew. Now, even though it operates pretty quietly in the background, fibrinogen is the absolute giant of our big three by weight, and it acts as your body's emergency repair crew. Seriously, the next time you get a paper cut, just know that this huge 340,000 Dalton molecule is springing right into action. It rapidly breaks down into a physical mesh called fibrin, catching and trapping red blood cells to create a clot and stop the bleeding. And because of its massive size, abnormal spikes in your fibrinogen levels are a really clear indicator to doctors that you might be dealing with acute infections, trauma, or even a stroke.
Which brings us to Section 5, reacting to body stress.
Here's the thing. These plasma proteins don't just sit there passively. They react wildly when your body is under attack from severe inflammation, infections, or neoplastic conditions, like tumors. In the medical world, we call this the acute phase response. During these biological emergencies, your plasma completely shifts its priorities. Positive acute phase proteins like CRP and fibrinogen dramatically increase to fight the fire. Meanwhile, negative acute phase proteins like albumin and prealbumin purposefully decrease. Your body is essentially saying, hey, let's downregulate the routine maintenance so we can ramp up our emergency defenses.
Finally, Section 6, decoding disease. This is where it gets super cool, because this is where doctors get to act as diagnostic detectives. They use a fascinating clinical method called electrophoresis. Basically, by applying an electrical field, they force serum proteins to migrate from a positive anode to a negative cathode. And because each protein has a totally different size and charge, they move at different speeds. This effectively splits them out into 5 distinct visual bands, allowing doctors to uncover hidden diseases just based on how these proteins move. So when you look at a healthy person's electrophoretic pattern, it creates a very specific visual bar chart. Right there at the very front, occupying the major portion, like around 55% of the whole pattern, is a massive spike. That's our heavyweight champion, albumin. Following closely behind it are smaller, distinct bumps for the alpha-1, alpha-2, beta, and gamma globulin factions. When you see this exact visual signature, you are looking at the absolute picture of health. But when disease strikes, this pattern physically alters. It creates these literal biological blueprints for diagnosis. For instance, if a patient has a chronic infection, that usually small gamma band at the very end, it becomes a wide, swollen mountain of antibodies. In a really dangerous condition like multiple myeloma, a sharp, highly abnormal spike called an M band suddenly appears right in that same gamma region. If a patient is suffering from nephrotic syndrome, where small proteins are lost in the urine, the alpha-2 fraction becomes unusually prominent. And in liver cirrhosis, where the liver just stops producing properly, that massive, thick albumin band at the front becomes worryingly thin.
Beyond just looking at the visual bands, there's an incredibly important mathematical equation clinicians look for. It's the normal albumin to globulin ratio, or simply the AG ratio. In a healthy human, there will always be 1.2 to 1.5 parts of albumin for every 1 part of globulin.
This simple number is the ultimate numerical indicator of harmony in the human body. It perfectly balances maintenance and defense. Whenever this precise mathematical harmony is thrown off, like say the ratio drops too low or climbs abnormally high, it is a massive red flag. It immediately signals underlying chaos, like liver dysfunction, nephrosis, or an immune disorder, prompting doctors to jump in and investigate further. Which brings us to a really fascinating final thought for this explainer. Right now, as you're sitting here listening to this, your liver is actively pumping out albumin to keep your blood volume stable, your immune cells are crafting gamma globulins to defend you, and fibrinogen is just standing by, ready for any emergency. It's an invisible, life-saving balancing act happening in your veins every single second. So, considering everything we've just learned, what do you think your own protein bands look like right now? Keep learning, keep wondering, and we'll see you in the next explainer.